The Lord be with you. What is in your playlist? What kinds of things have you been reading or watching or listening to, especially during these days when we have had such odd times and have needed some distractions and some things to motivate us just to kind of get us through these days? What have you been experiencing? What have you been into? What has been helpful to you? That's the question we've been asking during this pandemic and all of its fallout and all of the trivial things that have sort of spun out of control and affected our lives during. What are those things that we can encourage each other with through movies or TV shows or music or even books? So again, this is a little bit different of a series. This one is meant to be a little bit more communal, a little bit more interactive. It allows you to sort of give some input and interact with others, and also to suggest some things for the future. I want to give thanks, especially after our last installment. I know that Shar had made a couple of recommendations for some songs that were helpful, especially through the holiday season for her. And those are definitely things that I am going to listen to and maybe even offer some commentary on in the days or weeks or months ahead. But we'll see how that goes. Up to this point, we have basically been reviewing 2 movies and 1 song. So I want to do things different today. I specifically want to look at a book today. And the book that I want to recommend for your pandemic playlist, and has been on my pandemic playlist, is the book The Other Side of the River by Alex Kotlowitz. So let me give you just a little bit of introduction as to how I came across this book in the first place. So I can't remember exactly when or how this happened, but sometime in my college years, I had experienced Alex Kotlowitz as an author with his previous book, which was called There Are No Children Here. But I can't remember, it's kind of a chicken and egg thing, which happened first. I for sure saw him on the campus of the university I was attending. He was giving a lecture on his first book. But I can't remember if I went to see him because I'd already read his book and really liked it and wanted him to sign it, or if I went and heard him speak and was so impressed with his presentation that I bought his book. Either way, he did autograph a copy of that book for me there. And that book in and of itself is a very interesting, powerful read, where he follows 2 young black boys growing up in Cabrini Green, back when those housing tenements used to exist. And just tells kind of a heartbreaking and yet strangely hopeful story about what it means to grow up in urban plight. And even for him as a white author, what it means to get to know these boys and to care for these boys and their upbringing and what their future is going to look like. So I was familiar with his name, really enjoyed his writing style. It was some of the most compelling nonfiction that I had ever read up to that point. And then years later, I was perusing my mother-in-law's bookshelf, which I do from time to time, and happened to come across this book, The Other Side of the River. Now, I didn't recognize the title of the book, didn't know anything about it, but I did recognize the name Alex Kotlowitz. He had made such an impression upon me that I immediately clicked. I knew the name, I knew the author, I remembered how much I liked There Are No Children Here. So I took a look at the book, and I discussed with my mother-in-law why she had that book. Well, come to find out, she bought it because it was a piece of history a little close to home for her. So my wife's family is from the southwestern corner of Michigan, and they live not too far from what are called the Twin Cities of St. Joseph and Benton Harbor. And that is what the book is about. It's about those two cities, those two communities, and the river that divides them. Now, even though they are right next to each other, literally just across the river from one another, they couldn't be more distinctly different communities. St. Joe is predominantly white and affluent, more of a beach resort kind of community. Benton Harbor, again, just a stone's throw away, is predominantly black and impoverished and struggles quite a bit. So, needless to say, there are a lot of tensions between those two communities and a lot of territorialism and sort of geographical segregation amongst each other. And the book is about, in the spring of 1991, the body of a 16-year-old black youth washes up in the St. Joseph River on the St. Joe side of the river, which launches this investigation into what happened to this young man, whose name was Eric McGinnis. Now, Kotlowitz researched this for 5 years. He followed the case. He interviewed over 200 people who were involved in this young man's life or in the community. And what he found is actually quite telling, not so much in the title of the book, but in the subtitle, which is actually called A Story of Two Towns, a Death, and America's Dilemma. And that's exactly what the book is about. It isn't so much about Eric McGinnis as much as this becomes the catalyst that these two communities have to sort of bring together all of the tensions, all of the stereotypes, all of the racism that has been going on not only in those communities but across our country. This story in and of itself becomes a microcosm for much bigger events nationally. Now, I love Kotlowitz's style, which is why I'm recommending it. He writes to me not like a nonfiction writer does. He writes to me more like a good fiction writer does, where there's lots of little cliffhangers, there's lots of little chapters that compel you to have to read the next chapter. He drops little clues, little hints. You follow the mystery page by page. It doesn't go in a chronological order, and it doesn't tell sort of a procedural story. He takes lots of detours and follows lots of tangents to talk about the history of the community and sort of the economics of the community and different people's opinions. And he jumps forward and backward in time. He even gives a few of his own theories on what he thinks happened. Because again, at the end of the day, it isn't necessarily something that is resolvable. It's just that thing that gives the impetus to scratch the scab off, to see the wound that's festering underneath. And that is actually why I'm recommending it for our pandemic playlist. Because sometime this summer, after all of the headlines about Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, a lot of these racial tensions and this racial divide really started to surface in our country again. They've always been there, but sometimes it's just those events that draws everything out. And even though I had read this book years ago, all of a sudden, as I was continuing on my own journey, looking at racial righteousness, my own biases, my own shortcomings, and even the community in which I live, this book came to mind, this story came to mind, and I was like, way back when, I probably read this in the early 2000s originally, it just clicked with me. He exposes a lot of things, even back in the 90s, that are still prevalent today. He does a very good job of holding a mirror up to us so that we are forced to examine the lives we live, the locations in which we live, the discriminations that we have, and how that continues to hurt our society, and particularly the youths that are growing up in our society. So if you are able to sort of stomach that and to do some good, hard, laborious work of trying to dig deeper into what really is wrong with our country, and maybe some things that we could do differently, ways that we can think differently about one another, I think this is a good book for you to read. So as I said, this is more of an interactive community. I'm going to ask you to go ahead and comment down below. Feel free to hit the thumbs up, the like button, either on YouTube or on Facebook. Feel free to share this if you think there are others who might benefit from a discussion like this or a recommendation like this. And let me know if you have read the book, what you thought of it, even if you didn't like it. I mean, that's totally fair. We're just trying to make suggestions to one another to help examine our lives and to move us forward in life as we go through these trying times. If you are in the process of reading it, let me know what you think. If you're going to read it, particularly because of this recommendation, let me know as well. And even if you have other suggestions, like people have given in the past, I will certainly continue to accumulate those and look forward to reading and listening to and watching other things that we can share together as a virtual community. So until then, in these days of ongoing pandemic, may the peace of God be with you. Amen.